And welcome to the Tucson Racket and Fitness Club for the WPH Race for 8, sponsored by the Simple Green. My name is Dave Vincent, alongside broadcast partner David Fink. We are in the Vern Roberts qualifying bracket. Armando Ortiz versus Andy Schad today. Andy Schad, formerly of this club right here in Tucson, Tucson Racket and Fitness, and Armando Ortiz, who was one of the original named 8 players here on this race for 8. He was in the Elite 8 and he's dropped off now, and he has to re-qualify to get back onto the tour. Dave?
Armando comes into this qualifier, Dave, as the #1 seed. He'll be taking on Andy Schad, Dave, who's been a top 12 player for a number of years. Andy's been out of the game for about 4 years, traveled overseas with work, and now he's back and playing very well. There's no history whatsoever, Dave, between these two guys. Their careers sort of on opposite paths, as Andy coming out of the game, as Armando establishing himself as one of the top players. But Dave, as we know, Armando, one of the most explosive players in the history of this sport at just 22 years old, and Andy Schad, Dave, one of those percentage players who likes to rally, digs a lot of balls. So it should be an interesting matchup, Dave. Andy Schad, 40 years old, but we are playing just 1 game to 25. I don't think that conditioning should have too much of an effect here in our first match.
Now let's talk about that format that we're using here in Tucson, Arizona, where it is a 1-game match to 25. What are the other little rules that go along with that?
Well, we're going to have a halftime at 15. So the first player, Dave, that scores 15, whether it's 15-0 or 15-14, will take a 3-minute timeout. And that's sort of like a halftime, Dave, or also an in between the game, something to stop the momentum or maybe gain some momentum if you're not playing quite as well. And like we have in all the other race stops, Dave, we'll be playing no bad bounces. Players will have 3 timeouts and 2 glove changes, and it'll be win by 2.
Win by 2, that's interesting. That is the format used just for the qualifiers, but then when you get into the top 12 that will be happening starting tomorrow morning, it'll be 2 games to 21, tiebreaker to 11. There's no bad bounces here, and this club in Tucson is known for having its strange little crooked doorways, and the boards are sometimes lopsided. The walls aren't all exactly perfect, so that's going to make up for some interesting play, Dave.
Well, I did ref Andy Schad's first match here this morning, Dave, against Jason Coronado, and really had no factor whatsoever. There might have been 1 or 2 bad bounces, but certainly nothing that affected the game. Dave, we're going to jump right into the action here. It's Armando Ortiz serving.
1-0 serve 0 here. That's the first serve from Mondo, who did not look focused in Idaho, and he didn't look very good at the U.S. Open in Southern California. Let's see if it's a change here in Tucson.
I like what I see, Dave, with Armando's body language early here. Even in the warm-ups, Dave, he looked very focused. He was very light on his feet. That's not what I saw from him in the last 2 stops, where he didn't look too good. Armando, Dave, for the first time wearing the lensless eye guards, so we won't see him taking those eye guards off after every point, cleaning them, and we've seen those eye guards fall off a number of times also. You know, Dave, we talk so much about the importance of getting off to a good start. I think it's critical that Andy Net gets off to a good start and lets Armando know that.
Sorry, Andy Schad.
Excuse me.
Right.
But to let Armando know that he's here for a serious competition. Armando doesn't even know who Andy Schad is, Dave. They just met about
true.
5 minutes ago. And as you know, Dave, if you're playing someone that you don't know and you get off to a hot start, you feel invincible. If Andy Schad can let Armando know that he's there and apply some pressure, it could be a close match. Andy Schad, Dave, in his prime, which was about 10 to 15 years ago, had one of the best backwall games that I've ever seen. And there you see it, a good example of it from Andy Schad. Beautiful soft kill down the right side. But as you know, Dave, playing against Armando, he will give you backwall setups. If Andy Schad can execute those backwall setups, could see a great matchup here. Surprised that Andy's using the power serve there. I think Andy would be more well suited to slow the game down a little bit against Armando. Armando loves to play that ground and pound style.
We will try to get that referee's microphone turned up just a little bit. But I agree with you about that Mondo Ortiz. He wants you to hit the ball down into his power. So you're almost forced to have to go up to the roof.
Let's see if Andy can keep this lob serve off the back wall. Earlier today, Dave, Andy had a hard time keeping his lob serve from coming off the back wall. If it does, that's just a T-ball shot for Armando Ortiz. We couldn't follow that ball, Dave, in the back left corner, but that ball just squelching out and dying.
Score here is 1-1.
Andy's making his first ever appearance on the webcast, Dave. Armando's a veteran here on the webcast. But for those who don't know Andy, Dave, he's probably the nicest guy in the world. I know no one's ever said that about you, but
I'm waiting for the day.
He's so nice, Dave, that it's almost hard to push yourself to play hard against him because he's just so friendly. He actually carries on a conversation with you during the matches.
Here's a serve from Mondo Ortiz, who represents Team Salt Lake City Aces.
We call them the lowly Aces. They're buried in the basement, Dave, and look at that shot from Armando. They won't be in the basement long if Armando continues to execute 38-foot flat kills with his left hand.
That was a tremendous shot right there from Mondo Ortiz. And we got to see it. Great camera angle from the WPH. You're watching this live feed courtesy of the World Players of Handball and its sponsors at racefor8.com. Referee is Danny Cordova. He wanted to be on the live webcast and got his chance.
Armando drives that ball into the floor. Not a good backwall shot from Andy Schad.
One serves three. It's a score here as Andy Schad in the blue serving to Mondo Ortiz. Now, Dave, you played against Andy when you were touring before the finger injury back in the old days of the Pro Tour.
Andy and I actually had a standing twice-a-week game in Tucson when I went to school here. Andy known to his fans as the Born Identity, sometimes just the Born Schad, but he is a top secret intelligence agent for the United States Armed Forces.
Well, that's so secret, I didn't even know you knew that.
But you're saying you did.
I did, but I didn't know you did.
So what you're saying is you think you have better sources than I.
I thought I did.
Uh-huh. Perhaps now you'll reconsider.
You might know more than I do. One serves four. It's great court sounds right there, hearing Andy Schad breathe out as he prepared to serve there.
It was a terrible serve there from Andy. Earlier this morning, Dave, Andy trying to serve behind himself to the left came up short 96% of the time, according to Gene Casimoto, and that time he gives it a little bit too much. The ball comes way off the back wall. Andy Schad was up 15-3, Dave, this morning before the halftime, and then it was Jason Coronado coming on and rallying to lose 25-18, but that took a lot out of the Born Identity, Andy Schad. And he'll need all the energy he can muster here against the spry Armando Ortiz.
Wow, second serve and he goes long.
Armando's known as the assassin, Dave, because he takes out the top players. He comes out of nowhere, Dave, and shocks the world. We saw it here last year, earlier this year at this very club. Took out Alan Garner before losing to Nadi Alvarado Jr. That was after he qualified, Dave. And then just 2 weeks later, took out Sean Lenning at the LAAC Invitational.
Both of those tournaments, though, he lost to Nadi Alvarado. I like that shot.
Nice shot there from Andy. Takes just enough off of that pass shot behind Armando to keep the ball off the back wall. Armando with great hustle there. We didn't see Armando hustling like that, Dave, in his first 2 outings of this race season. Losing to the double-headed Irish monster, first Charlie Shanks and then Robbie the Buzzsaw McCarthy at the U.S. Open.
Score here is 1-4. Do you think, there's a short ball, do you think that partially the reason why we're seeing a little different Mondo Ortiz is the fact that he was not invited to this tournament? He has to qualify again. That's kind of a wake-up call in a way. I mean, you're on the verge yourself as a pro player in this tournament to be having to rededicate.
I have actually rededicated before having to requalify. So we'll see if that makes a difference, but I know that you're anxiously awaiting my drop-off. There's a lot of different ranking scenarios, Dave, and I'm sure we'll talk about them quite a bit, that could result based on the matches here. We're dropping off the Minnesota WPH Pro Stop from November of 2010, which means Dave Chapman, who won that event, will have to defend 10 points here.
Ooh.
Andy Nett will be defending 4 points. Tommy Little will be defending 4 points. I will be defending 4 points. And then you've got other guys, Dave, like Armando Ortiz, who's not defending any points, who'll just be adding to his total, as well as Charlie Shanks, who will also see moving, I believe, into the top 6 after this event, possibly the top 5. We could potentially, Dave, see more fluctuation after this event than we've ever seen in the rankings. It seems like, Dave, Armando completely dominating here, but he only leads 4-1 6 minutes into this match. Make that 2-4. We see Armando going down there, Dave, to one knee, a la Nadia Alvarado Jr., unable to convert that right corner kill, and it's Andy Schad in the front court redigging and wins that point. Our scoreboard incorrect here, David. The score is 3-4. I believe, Dave, that Andy Schad has weathered the Armando Assassin Ortiz storm here, and he's got himself firmly entrenched in this match. You can hear Andy Schad breathing heavily already early into this match, but Andy Schad extremely fit. I actually believe more fit than the younger Armando Ortiz. Andy Schad takes a lot of pride in his cross training. He's 40 years old and he's about as fit as any 25-year-old that you'll ever meet. Andy Schad's been in there against the biggest hitters in the sport during the last 15 to 20 years. He's seen this kind of power before, Dave. But he's only been playing handball for about 7 months since he returned from the Middle East on assignment. I played him, Dave, just 3 months into his comeback, and he was already playing great handball. And I told him this morning that I expect him to be playing even better after about another 4 or 5 months under his belt. Looks really good here now, thus far.
Andy's lob serve is a little too low, I believe, for what he's trying to do.
Well, he forced Armando to go to the ceiling there. And here's a setup. I always believe, Dave, that what really held Andy Schad back from being that top 8 or top 4 player was the ability to go on offense with his left and the ability to take the ball out of the air. He doesn't really do either. He doesn't look to take the ball out of the air, Dave, and he doesn't end rallies with his left hand. And those are really 2 critical components to establishing yourself as one of those top 6 or top 4 players.
Score here is 4-3. There's a second serve. Mondo Ortiz representing Salt Lake City Aces in the server's block here against Andy Schad. Yeah, I mean, he's back trying to qualify again. You've seen that name for the last 20 years or so, on and off, as a qualifier.
And look at that shot from Armando. Absolutely incredible. Falling back off his back foot with his left hand in a flat kill. Andy Schad, one of those guys, Dave, that doesn't look that fast, but he just seems to pick up everything.
Score here is now 6-3 in favor of Mondo. This is game number 1. In fact, it's the only game. We play 1-game matches to 25, and you have to win by 2 at 15. It's called halftime, and we give you 3 minutes to kind of recoup. It also can work in the favor of the person that is trailing if their opponent has some momentum. Dave, can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, Dave, just like a halftime in a football game or between games in a handball match, you take that 3-minute break, or, you know, in between games in a 21-point handball match, 5 minutes, a lot of different things can happen. A lot of emotions can change. Momentum can absolutely turn over. This morning, Dave, it was Andy Schad leading 15-3 at halftime, and Jonathan Chavez came back to score 15 points to Andy Schad's 10, nearly came back and won that game.
Also, it gives the player an opportunity to get some coaching, and they do have coaches that travel around with these players. And
Armando actually travels with an 8-person entourage. 2 of those are coaches. One's an offensive coach, the other a defensive coach. Of course, his masseuse and his nutritionist, his physio trainer.
And I believe, rounds out the 8 with the hairstylist. But, you know, I noticed that the players would come off the court and talk. I see Sean Linning's here, you're here, and some of the players, John Bike is sitting around, and they're coming over and they're asking for advice, which is interesting. And that 3-minute timeout is helpful.
Andy Schad keeps it a lot more simple, Dave. He travels with just 2 people, just his hairstylist and his coach.
Listen for the score here from the referee, Danny Cordova. 3 serve 6. You see the scoreboard powered by Zions, the official sports drink of the UFC, and now the official scoreboard provider of the WPH.
And every time Andy has served the power serve, Dave, he's been on his heels trying to dig out Mondo's powerful returns. Armando comes way under that ball, Dave. It's a big reverse kill. Didn't catch it perfectly. Received a number of messages, Dave, from Schad fans. His name is actually spelled S-C-H-A-D. It's spelled incorrectly there on the scoreboard.
But it is spelled correctly on the draw sheet, and that's what matters.
That's true.
I don't know what's going on here.
Now Armando's reversing the referee's call, which would have given Armando a point. And that's great sportsmanship, Dave, from Armando Ortiz. I love to see that. Armando acknowledging that the serve was short despite the referee calling the ball good. Love to see that. I believe, Dave, some of that has been lost in the new age of sports, including handball.
Now Andy Schad's name is now Andy Schad. It's actually S-C-H.
I thought maybe this was 2000 election and he was a hanging Chad.
Well, we'll see what happens at halftime.
I don't like that overhand lob serve as a second serve, Dave, because you have to hit that lob so close to the short line for it to be effective. And you know, when you're hitting a second serve, you don't want to take the risk of hitting a double fault. That time, Andy Schad earns the back wall setup and kills it.
And sometimes what happens is you you overhit that lob to try to get it over that line, and it leaves a huge back wall setup. And a guy like Mondo, who has an amazing left hand, you're almost writing your own death sentence.
I believe, Dave, players should be using the side walls for the lob serve. The side wall keeps the ball off the back wall and forces opponents to hit the ball in that sort of chest to overhand swing, and you can't do anything from there.
That too also has its consequences, though.
I feel like there's a huge margin for error, though, on that serve, where your opponent's never going to have a setup, as opposed to a lob serve or a power serve where it's a setup almost 50% of the time. The old adage in handball, Dave, was you want to earn a setup or an ace with your serve, but the returners, Dave, are so quick and so powerful now that if you don't hit that serve perfectly, it is a setup. And Andy Schad with a terrible error there with his left hand.
Score here, believe it or not, as much as Mondo looks good, he's only winning by 1 point, Dave.
And now Armando, Dave, not really thinking his way through these points, just trying to overpower Andy Schad, and that will not work. Andy Schad has seen power.
At times I watch Andy play, and I see a similarity between him and Tommy Little with those kind of paddle shots with the left hand, the dump shots.
I agree with you. That was a rally that Andy Schad should have won. He pinched the corner there twice, Dave, when Armando was out of position and the ball hung up. Armando able to track it down and eventually win that rally. But Andy Schad had scored 2 consecutive points and had a very easy opportunity to tie the score at 6. Just missed that setup with his left hand, and now it's Armando scoring immediately after the side out and leads, I believe, 7-5, Dave. A referee has not announced it yet, but I'm pretty sure that was a point.
Yeah, but we've been on the road so long, you never know what the ref's going to call sometimes on those shots like that, Dave.
Well, I'm happy to say, Dave, that 12 minutes into our broadcast, I haven't criticized the referee yet. That's a record for me. I'm not going to make any promises, but it's all about taking those incremental steps.
Well, it's the first couple steps of recovery, Dave.
I think Andy Schad, Dave, wasting a lot of energy with that power serve, and he hasn't been effective at all earning setups with that serve. And you know, Dave, it takes as much, if not more, energy to hit that power serve as it does to hit any shot. If you're not routinely getting setups or points off that serve, it's not worth it.
And that's not a bad idea right there, though. I like that serve.
He used the side wall there, Dave. And you see what happened. He's dominating that rally, and you use the side wall and keep the ball at that chest-high area, and your opponent really can't hurt you. If they try, it's a very low percentage shot.
Score here now is 6-7 with Andy Schad in the box. Let's see what he does here.
A lot of people, Dave, looked at me like I was crazy, like they usually do, when I said that I expected a close match here. Andy Schad, Dave, one of these guys that seems like he's tired, but it never really affects his play. And Andy Schad, Dave, is one of those guys, Dave, where you find yourself gasping for air because the rallies are so much longer than you're accustomed to playing.
You're watching Race for 8, stop number 3, brought to you by Simple Green and the World Players of Handball in Tucson, Arizona, as part of the Yes to Kids Foundation and Arizona State Handball Championships. Today is the qualifier. This is the qualifying bracket of the Vern Roberts bracket, I should say. between Armando Ortiz, who just hit a flat kill left-handed shot, and Andy Schad, who formerly lived in Tucson, Arizona, and is well known here in Tucson.
He's got a lot of fans in the gallery. It was Andy Schad having two great opportunities to tie the score here midway through this match, but skipping in setups, one with his left and one with his right, and now Armando leads by 2. And Dave, I don't know if you've played any of these one-game matches to 25 yet, but it really feels like that finish line is so much farther away when you know that 21 isn't the end of the game. Incredible serve there from Mondo. And now Armando really feeling comfortable. It was Andy Schad with a right-hand setup that would have tied the score at 7. Instead, he skips it. Armando comes in, and he's quickly scored 4 points in a row to stretch this lead to 11-6. That's the biggest lead of this match thus far.
Now, I know that it's early on here, but and we don't have the replay working at this moment, but you can say on that last shot, you can see Mondo bouncing back toward the back wall, taking that ball off the back wall, which means he's really comfortable and he feels pep in his step. Now, you didn't see him bounce in the middle of that rally, but previously you can see he was so confident that he felt like he can kind of drift and hop a little bit.
Armando's much more effective when he's hitting the ball at about 80% rather than 100% of his power. He loses a lot of his control and his kill shots don't stay down. It looks to me right now, Dave, that Andy Schad is completely exhausted. We'll see if he waits for halftime or potentially calls a timeout before halftime. I actually think, Dave, he should probably call a timeout here, try and regroup a little bit, and then wait for that 3-minute halftime. Give him 4 minutes to recover.
Nice left-handed laser right there from Andy Schad. 6-13, one-game match to 25, and yet the win by 2. This is the qualifying match right here between Andy Schad and Armando Ortiz. Now the winner will be placed into a blind draw to play one of the number 5, 6, 7, or 8 seeds. Now in the old days, Dave, the players would go into a blind draw, if they held a blind draw, into 1, 2, 3, and 4. But we do it different to make it more competitive in the middle of the bracket. And if you're sitting at home saying, wait, that's not fair because that gives 1, 2, 3, and 4 a first-round bye, and they're all fresh. Well, guess what? The qualifiers that come into the 12s, there's a 50% chance that they move on. And then those that go into the next round is about a 50% chance again to move on. So it's interesting how the stats work. That's after 3 pro stops here on the Race for 8.
There's been a lot of studies done on that, Dave, and you're alluding to those. But there's a lot to be said, Dave, for getting used to the ball and used to the courts, whereas those top 4 players don't have any matches under their belt. They come in cold, and that can be the difference. Beautiful shot from Mondo. Andy Schad with a good inning there, scoring 2, stopping some of Armando's momentum.
"13 serves 8. Mondo hits that ball hard, Dave, and I know he's one of the heavy hitters on the tour, and you've played him many times. What's the difference between Mondo Ortiz power and, let's say, power coming from Tommy Little? Both have real strong serves down the right. Right there, that type of serve is something that Tommy's known for, but what does Mondo's ball do that's different?
Well, Armando seems like he's hitting a laser that comes out of a shotgun. I mean, it's so fast and it's always so low. Tommy Little mixes it up quite a bit, uses his power, but also uses some finesse. Armando plays his best when he's hitting every ball pretty much as hard as he can hit it, or in that 80 to 90% range. But Armando constantly applying pressure with all the power that he uses with both hands. And you know that he's willing to go on offense from anywhere on the court as well.
You're watching the Tucson Race for 8, brought to you by Simple Green and the World Players of Handball, streaming live at racefor8.com. Do us a favor. Go online, get on your cell phone, your smartphone, text or email, post on your favorite social network site the fact that handball fans and your friends can watch this live feed courtesy of the World Players of Handball, Mintech, Tucson Rolling Shutters, First Star Sports, where you can up your game and play just like the pros at firststarsports.com/WPH, and Zions, the official scoreboard of the WPH. Please pass on the information, and if you have it, the schedule is posted at r2sports.com under the Yes to Kids Foundation handball link. You can find the actual broadcast schedule, and you can email it off to your friends, and hopefully they'll tune in and watch.
This is match number 1 of dozens of matches that we'll be covering here this weekend, Dave, including women's handball, big ball handball, and of course the round of 16 and all the way through the conclusion of the small ball men's pro stop race number 3 here, hosted by the Tucson Gunslingers at the Y2K Tucson Classic.
Yeah, it's an amazing tournament set up here in Tucson, Arizona. I believe the stats came out 73% of all entries in this tournament were players under the age of 30. Under the age of 30, Dave. And people say that, well, there's not enough kids that are playing handball and the sport is dying. Well, guess what? 73% of the participants in the tournament this weekend, and we have over close to 110 participants. So
but
over
what makes
70
this
of those.
event so interesting, Dave, is that we have so many veteran versus younger player matchups, including this match that we're watching right now is Armando Ortiz, almost half the age of Andy Schad. It'll be Abe Montijo, nearly half the age of John Bike, and then it'll be Luis Cordova, 2.5 times younger than his opponent, Danny Armijo.
Well, Cordova could actually be Danny Armijo's grandson. That's how old Dan Armijo is.
So it's going to be a very interesting day here, Dave, as it's youth versus experience. But don't forget, Dave, a lot of these youth have a lot of experience as well. Armando Ortiz just 22, but he's been playing pro handball for 5 years, traveling to almost every stop. Luis Cordova also building his resume, Dave, as he qualified here in April, and he also qualified at the Jake Plummer event.
The reason why you're seeing this long delay here is that Ortiz got to 15, and this is halftime. This is that mandatory 3-minute timeout, and you can see how this feels like it's an in-between game, you know, like we're playing a regular match. You can see how that can break a momentum.
Armando Ortiz with a beautiful tomahawk overhand fist, front wall, right sidewall kill. This is starting to look like a Armando Ortiz runaway here, as Andy Schad doing nothing more than just retrieving at this point, not applying any pressure. You see Armando camped out there in the front court, Dave, moving Andy side to side and front to back. Andy Schad does not see this kind of power, Dave, in Northern Virginia, where he's currently living. He's sparring with a lot of the guys down there, Dave, but it's very hard to duplicate.
Well, it's not the same, and I know
speed here.
You have troubles as well in the area that you're at, having to play 2-on-1s and trying to get creative with scoring formats just to get motivated to try to improve your game, or at least stay steady as you've been for the last 3 or 4 years. And it becomes kind of taxing, because after a while you kind of lose interest in the sport because it's difficult to it's almost like it's half delusional too, because you go, yeah, I'm beating these guys 21-1 and 21-2, and then you go to a tournament and find out it's completely different when it gets out into the real world. You change your game to play 2-on-1, and it actually is not for the better sometimes. Maybe physically it'll help your body.
I agree with you. The strategy is completely different when you've got two guys in there.
You turn down taking shots that you would normally take in a singles match, and then you get to singles and you haven't developed that. And you look at the front row there, you see Sean Lenning sitting in the second row, which is tremendous to see the pro players sitting courtside and watching these matches here. You're watching the Tucson Race for 8, brought to you by Simple Green and the World Players of Handball, First Star Sports and Zions, as well as Tucson Rolling Shutters and Mintech, to name just a few.
The ball, Dave, coming off Armando Ortiz's hands like we've seen it in past years when he's been so dangerous, including when he beat Alan Garner and Sean Lenning just about 6 months ago. Didn't have that sound in the last 2 stops, Dave. Combination of perhaps not being as well prepared and maybe not as motivated as he should have been, but sometimes you need those losses.
Yeah, you know, you grow from those, but what I saw from Mondo Ortiz is the fact that he just looked like he was overweight and a little bit out of shape in Idaho. It seemed like he shed just a little bit of weight there at the Simple Green U.S. Open of handball, but still was unable to get past Charlie Shanks. But here, this looks like a different Mondo Ortiz.
Well, let's not forget, Dave, it was Armando drawing Robbie McCarthy in the first round at the U.S. Open, a very difficult draw. Robbie McCarthy buzzsawed his way through everyone in that field up until Charlie Shanks in the final, where Shanks pushed him to an 11-9 tiebreaker, but the Americans, Dave, didn't offer much resistance at all to the buzzsaw Robbie McCarthy. So not that terrible of a result for Armando Ortiz. He would have liked to have advanced there, but Robbie McCarthy was on fire that week, and now it's Armando motivated, re-energized, and looking to maybe make this his week.
Well, we'll find out here after that 3-minute halftime. Andy Schad was told to take off his shirt and change it. So he's doing a veteran move here. He could have changed his shirt and his gloves during halftime, but apparently he decided not to.
Well, Andy Schad actually wears 3 pairs of gloves on each hand, so it's time consuming. Now, Dave, the timeouts are 1 minute when you call a timeout, 2 minutes for a glove change, and 3 minutes for halftime, but you see a lot of these timeouts extending well beyond those 1, 2, and 3 minute timeouts, and it's frustrating for the fans, Dave, and for us here in the booth, and also for the players. Not really sure, Dave, what can be done about that, because a lot of times you see these guys coming into the court, their gloves still are not on. They're wiping the floor after time has been called. I know that there's a big meeting tonight, Dave, that all the pro players are actually looking forward to attending, mostly because there's a free dinner. But we will be discussing all of those topics.
And some of the topics in hand are the code of conduct, the way that the players conduct themselves on and off the court, the clothing that they wear, and also talking about experimental rule changes to help make the game flow better for TV, and all in all trying to get on the same page basically. And really what we're seeing on the Pro Tour is these players are very willing and open to do whatever it takes to help handball grow.
Well, what's cool, Dave, is that all these players, despite ranging from just about 20 years old to 48 years old, all have their own opinions. They've all played a lot of handball, and they all have their own beliefs on what could improve the game. So it'll be interesting to have everyone in the same room where we can actually impose and vote on some of these new rule changes. Armando taking care of business here, Dave. He's the #1 seed in this qualifier. Came in as the top-ranked player, ranked #9. Unfortunately for Armando, all top 8 guys showing up. It shows you how much these race stops mean to these guys, Dave, that in every race stop we've had thus far, it's been all top 8 guys showing up. And you know, Dave, in the sort of hodgepodge pro tour over the last 3 or 4 years, we haven't seen that kind of quality participation from the top guys. We've seen a smattering of the top guys, maybe 50 to 60% of them at any given stop, but now we're seeing 100%.
Yeah, it's amazing, actually. In that sense alone, after the first 3 race stops, it is a success in that sense. We can't hold the victory party now and wave the flags, Dave, but we are seeing some great participation here from the top players. I mean, I think at one point I sat back and looked, we had 14 of the top 17 players participate in the first 2 events, to include this one now. All looked like it could have been called short. We're just missing Paul Brady. That's it.
Well, he's actually not ranked anymore, Dave.
I know.
Hasn't played in a ranking tournament in over a year and a half. We only count events, Dave, that what a get there from Armando. Absolutely incredible. We only count events they've played within the last 12 months.
Mondo apologized for that last shot, that fisticuff, just stick my hand out rollout that he just got. But you're right, the ranking system, it's, you can't get ranked unless you play, so.
Now, I don't think many people would argue, Dave, that Paul Brady is the best player in the world, but without showing up, we can't just put a number next to his name.
We'd like to.
Right.
And we feel foolish sometimes when we make the rankings and don't put his name on, but in another way, you have to earn it too. You have to play in these events, and we don't know after a first race stop if Paul Brady would get injured or what would happen 2 weeks later and what would happen 2 weeks later, because that's all part of what professional sports are about. And we see that in other sports where players actually get injured and go on the injured reserve, and so you have to take all that stuff into account. Paul Brady seems to be off and on injured as of late. Still the best player I've ever seen, but the tour goes on. Now we have Mondo Ortiz just a couple points away now from taking down Andy Schad and qualifying in the Vern Roberts qualifying bracket. All of the qualifying brackets named after local handball legends. Charlie Wickers, Vince Sanangelo, Doug Clark, Vern Roberts.
But just to close out your last point, Dave, about participation, Michael Jordan retired at the top of the sport in 1993. They still handed out NBA championships during his 2.5-year retirement. Fans still came out to watch, and that's just the way sports is.
(10-24) is the score here.
Armando came within 1 inch of qualifying with that last left-handed kill shot attempt, just barely skipping it.
Well, Andy Schad had a good showing here at this tournament for his first pro stop back.
Andy Schad, a very difficult draw. I believe, Dave, that he drew the toughest guy in the field.
Well, he is the #1 seed, so no doubt about that. Now, normally that play would be played over. It hit the light and came straight down, but there is no bad bounces called here in Tucson. 12 serves 24, and you see no complaining from the players. They just accept it because they know that it's equal for both players. They can be mad about it, but they just move on, and you see no anxiety, and we'll talk about that when this game wraps up.
I love the rule, personally, Dave, and you see so much complaining and arguing over bad bounce calls or no calls when you do play with bad bounces, and this just completely eliminates that. I think it puts the player's mind at ease and also makes the referee's job quite a bit easier and allows him to focus on.
But let's talk about that game, putting their mind at ease part, because that's the real intricate thing about playing all bad bounces. We have seen before, and I know that you've fell victim to this, and I know I do when I play in tournaments. There's a bad call that the referee makes, or there's a bad bounce and the ref doesn't call it, and all of a sudden you start getting mad at yourself, and you might lose your cool for 2 or 3 points. That could be what is dictating the outcome of your actual match or even your qualifying bid. Now you see Mondo shook that very quickly there. There was a bad bounce, he shook it. There was another play he didn't like. He immediately called a timeout, and it's not so much into his head anymore.
That's absolutely true. The difference, Dave, between these top players is often just 1 or 2 points. And if you allow a bad call or a questionable bad bounce call to affect you, that could be the difference between winning the title and losing in the first round. Andy Schad putting together a nice run here, but it's too late. Perhaps building some momentum for his next qualifying bid. I would expect to see Andy Schad, Dave, at race stop number 5 in Atlanta, Georgia, which is the only race stop on the East Coast. Andy Schad living on the East Coast in Virginia, DC area. He would also be able to play in the Masters National Doubles Championship there, which is being held in conjunction with race stop number 5. It's a very exciting concept, Dave. I know that you're looking forward to it. Potentially winning a national title and qualifying there, Dave.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
That could be you.
Well, I'm actually going to secretly ask Andy if he wants to play doubles in the 40 division. Don't tell anybody.
Okay.
Then again, I might have John Bike trying to qualify there, and he and I have won a couple 35 divisions, so.
You guys did lose in your last partnership together, though, I believe, to Tyler Hamill and Chris Rusing.
Yeah, and John has a kind of a rule that once you lose with him, you never play with him again. So we haven't spoke in 16 and a half months, so it's really frustrating.
Well, rules are meant to be broken, and you would be the first that would ever come back from that violation.
You're watching a one-game match to 25, and here is Armando Ortiz serving to take down Andy Schad and win the Vern Roberts bracket. Just a short ball.
Armando hitting that serve about 2 inches high off the front wall. Still almost made it past the short line.
There it is. Armando Ortiz qualifies here in Tucson. Armando taking down Andy Schad to win 25-15 and advancing to the Vern Roberts bracket. Now, Mondo will have a chance to go into the top 12 when he has the blind draw held later tonight here at the Tucson Racket and Fitness Club. We are going to take a quick timeout. Luis Cordova versus Danny Armijo, two guys that are pretty familiar with each other's game. Dan Armijo plays in out of New Mexico there, and then little Cordova's just over the border in Juarez, Mexico, or in El Paso, and I know that they've matched up a few times. That will be for the Charlie Wicker bracket, and we will be back at 3 o'clock Mountain Time to catch that qualifying bid in just a few. Once again, Armando Ortiz qualifies one more time with the WPH and is now going to be scheduled into the top 12. He wants to be back onto that Elite 8, Dave. I know it's motivated him to come out strong, and then he just took down Andy Schad 25-15. We're going to take a quick timeout for Linda Manning as well as Omar Lemus and broadcast partner Dave Fink. We'll be back in just a bit. Stick close here at racefor8.com.
20 years, the Inner City Handball Association has helped community athletes accomplish their dreams. Help us continue our work. Donate today.